mission that we're doing for 3 days here in Jamaica. We are stemming from the summit, the EU Latin American Caribbean Summit in July 2023, where we launched the Global Gateway Investment Agenda for Latin America and the Caribbean. I think you have a little infographic over there that explains a bit what we do. We have a larger recollection of projects and ideas for the whole Caribbean and for Latin America. Idea was at the time and is now to unlock investments, European investments in Latin America and the Caribbean for key technologies and key sectors for the green and energy transition and the digital transition in Jamaica and in the region, and how to support companies that want to invest, but also support the government of Jamaica and the society of Jamaica in attracting those investments in key areas. So it's not a general investment purpose, it's about supporting the Jamaican government, for example, in their bid to go have a strong renewable energy mix in the coming years. I think it's 50% for 2030, which is a big jump, and therefore that requires investment and technology. And we would like to bring that, and we would like to support European companies that come and produce and distribute renewable energy here in Jamaica. But that requires it requires a conversation with the government. So we are preparing some files also with the European Investment Bank and with other member states, with the French, with the Germans, with the Spanish. We are preparing some possibilities for European companies to invest more in those frontier transition technologies here in Jamaica. We're also working on the digital transition. We have a big portfolio on the digital, and I will be participating this afternoon, I think, with the government, the Prime Minister and the Minister of Digitalization. I'm not sure the name. There you go. In an event on digital skills and digitalization, for which the European Union has been very active in supporting Jamaica's government and society in going forward in bringing digital skills to the people. But we're also working with European companies to enhance the capacity of digitalization, the digital technologies, etc., etc. This is what we're going to do this morning. And then also tomorrow we are working on Kingston Harbour, how to make it more sustainable, how to work also on the rehabilitation and the drainage of a number of areas, with a number also of European and Jamaican companies, how to invest in the harbour to make it a logistical hub, which is what Jamaica is asking for, and therefore you need investment, you need people who risk their money and invest. At the same time, we're going to ask everyone to make the Jamaica Harbour, the Kingston Harbour, a model in the Caribbean, also of efficiency, of greening. So all these things, as you see, are the main bets that we have here in Jamaica. Other issues that I'm looking at, and you will probably have in the little map there, is the island-wide broadband access that we're working on. All these things require technology, investment, and capital. And while most of our companies have all of them, sometimes it's complicated for them to come directly to Jamaica. And what we're doing here is working with the government to attract them and to push them if that's the case. So thank you again for coming, but I'm of course happy to engage in a little conversation or some comments or questions and answers you may have, so that we can maybe exchange a bit more. Again, and happy to be here. Thank you. It's not about landing an investment that comes completely from the air. Most of the companies that are here and most of the companies that want to invest need a strong Jamaican partner and strong Jamaican educated workforce that can work on a number of technical aspects. And that's where I think the whole let's say, the promising effect of investment comes together. Why? Because it's not about bringing a whole set of Europeans here to work on renewables. It's also about training Jamaicans to work on renewable energy, on the production, on the generation, on the whole, let's say, industrial issue that is behind that. And that is why we need local partners, and that is why we need to have a trained workforce in renewable energies, in digitalization. These are the future jobs, as to speak. And therefore, it is important that we work also with the government and with the companies in how training is going to be done, vocational training for young people, so that they can specialize in what is going to be the issue of the future. I mean, if you take all the full consequences of the government's target to reach 50% of renewable energy by 2030, at a moment in which I think it's 11% now, that requires in the next 7 years that you're going to have to train a lot of people who know how the whole thing works. Technicians, people setting up solar panels, windmills, green hydrogen, whatever technology you're going to use, software, legislation on how to generate and distribute renewable energy. So it is not only the investment part that we're interested in, is the training of Jamaican people to work on that, and there generate a whole, let's say, positive circle whereby more people will be attracted to invest in Jamaica, because there is a workforce that can support the investment and the technologies that go with it. At the same time, when European companies invest, you can ask them, but more often than not, they take many Jamaicans to Europe to see what's done, to look at the technology for training, etc., and then they bring them back to help with the installation and the operation of the plants, and that is, of course, a very interesting feature of the European investment. I think there is already a request for proposals launched by the government on the renewable energy, and that I'm not sure, but the period for that request ends rather April. So by April, we should have ready some files or some proposals for the government to look at from the side of European companies and other companies, because this is an open-ended request for proposals. The other issues we're looking at have different timelines. These are projects that are starting to happen. For example, we are working also with the National Water Commission on a number of issues related to the rehabilitation of the whole water system and the drainage. So all those have, we are starting to work. I'm not sure I can tell you it's going to be the next 2 months, but we are already working with the EIB and with the Jamaican government to see that happen. So I would say in this year, I think we will start seeing let's say consecutive announcements of investments happening, or at least the announcement that the investment is going to take place. The first thing that we need to understand on digitalization is we need to start with the children so that they understand what the technology is for and what the limits of the technology are, but they know how to use it for their advantage. As you say, I think all of us in all regions of the world, we're all looking at, with surprise, at how fast technology is going and also how fast climate change is going. And we all are aware that we need to change in a certain way. We need to adapt to this change. That is it's no secret in Europe, it's no secret in Jamaica. What we are trying to do in Europe is we are investing from the public sector, from Europe and from the member states, into pushing the society to that transition. And that is exactly what we're trying to do here in Jamaica. is, with the government, setting ambitious deadlines and ambitious targets. We're trying also to push the target and to push the investment so the transition happens. That, as you say, requires a all of society transformation. It also requires that those transitions support bridging inequality gaps, that they promote gender equality, so it's not just about generating renewable energy. So, for example, we have a couple of European companies in Brazil and in Mexico who have started, this is something that I haven't shared with the team, but we know it's happening. They have organized electrician schools for women. So because they see renewable energy and electricity being a fundamental part of the future, they've organized these training schools only for women, and apparently they are beyond success. They have too many requests, and that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, to make a change as we are transitioning. So it's very difficult that we all go digital if more than half of the population doesn't know or cannot access that knowledge and that access to government that we're all looking forward to. So that's part of what we are talking to the government. Today we have a meeting with the digital companies here, but then we're going to have a meeting with the minister to speak about the digitalization, how can Europe bring more support to Jamaica. We are working with the Jamaica Stock Exchange and with the government. The Jamaica Stock Exchange has been mandated by the government to develop a green bond framework. And this is a very interesting concept because we are also from the side of Europe. Europe is the largest green bond market in the world for issuance and for secondary trading. That supports investors, gives assurance to investors to invest in the green bond. Why? First of all, because there's a certain financial advantage, or there's a certain financial return promise, like with all bonds, there's an interest paid on buying bonds. But second, as Europe is slowly pushing itself to green, we are asking everyone, like I think is happening all over the world, we are asking all the investors and all the big investor funds to increase the amount of green investments they have in their portfolio. Now the issue is, you may ask, is how do I know an investment is green or greener? Because somebody needs to tell me. If I am BlackRock or I am Amundi and I'm going to invest in a certain project, I need someone to tell me that that project is green. Because if it's green, or very little green, my financial decision to invest will depend on that. Now, what we are doing with the Jamaica Stock Exchange is to organize a framework for Jamaica to determine when investing in Jamaica is green. So somebody, the government and the Jamaica Stock Exchange, says this is green. And that has to be reasonably aligned with what Europe is doing, because the investors in Europe are going to ask Jamaica, is this green as in green in Europe, or is it green somewhere else? And what is interesting about all this is that aligning does not mean having the same green qualities, because there are things that in Europe are green that in Jamaica are not, or the other way around. There are things that in Jamaica are green because you have a certain energy mix, because you have a certain economy and a certain way of producing things. So what we are trying to work with Jamaica is that Jamaica has a framework, we call it a taxonomy, but it has a framework that determines when investments are green in Jamaica. And what that does, if you then issue a green bond tied to that framework, the Commission, the European Commission, will certify, because of these conversations we're having with the Jamaica Stock Exchange, that this investment is green. It may not be green in Europe, but it's green in Jamaica. Why? Because it's making a progress towards decarbonization in Jamaica. Hence, the investors can come and buy the green bond, with the assurance that we, in Europe, we're going to say this counts as green. And what that does is it unlocks all the European investment funds that are looking for green investments and they don't find them. Why? Because they don't have an authority saying this is green. So the work we're doing with Jamaica is closing that gap, managing that Jamaica has a system of certifying that things are green, so that when a green bond is issued, it's backed by a number of projects which meet the Jamaican requirements for green, which then Europe would say, that's green. The whole system that we've elaborated in Europe and that we're working with Jamaica, we're also working with Mexico, with Colombia, with the Dominican Republic, and with Brazil on this, is about understanding how much green something is. And we have elaborated in Europe and for Europe criteria to understand. I'm going to say something so that you understand the concept, but this is not a real example, is if you go beyond 40%, we consider it green. If you go below 40%, we don't consider it green. You may say, why 40%? I may answer, well, why can you vote when you're 18 and not when you're 17 and 11 months? Well, that's it, because that's what we have decided. So in Jamaica, we're going to try to work in the same way to understand what is the green quotation that Jamaica says for itself, this is green, that is interoperable with the European quotation, so we can understand. I mean, you could say in Jamaica, if it's 10% green, it's green. And we may say, it's not enough. It's good for Jamaica, but we are not going to recommend European investors because only 10% green is not enough. But that's a conversation we need to have. So that is where we are right now in determining and supporting the Jamaica Stock Exchange and the government in working on those criteria. Yeah. Well, we have been. I'm visiting with Marianne the port tomorrow, and we are going to talk with the different companies that are there, including the Port Authority, the government, but also the companies that are physically in there, the German shipyard repair, CMA, CGM, so a number of operators. What we know is that the connection between the port, the drainage, the whole nature system is not what it should be, and is making the port not very efficient. It's not that the port is not working, it's that it could be more efficient. And it could certainly be greener, which is one of the issues that we're pushing all over the world, and I will explain in a minute. But what we're trying to do is convene a number of people around a couple of projects in the harbor, projects that are related to the harbor efficiency, but also to the water management and to the nature management in the mangroves. And what we're doing is bringing all those people together to see if we can kick a project that makes the harbor more efficient, which is the first step to making it a logistical hub. Because if you need to install yourself in the port and the port is not efficient, then you're not going to come. So that's the first step. After that, what we're going to start working is with the different companies on how they're going to invest in the port to enhance its capacity to receive and dispatch cargo and big ships. The fact that you have already a shipyard repair is a big bonus, because then people can come here, stop, unload, and work on the ship itself. But then we also looking at, would say, at the geographic location of Jamaica, right before, after the Panama Canal or before the Panama Canal. It's a very important place where maybe we can think very ambitiously. But the situation now is that you can't do that because the port's not efficient in terms of its resistance to its drainage, and a number of things. First of all, as an island, you need to have a place where things come in and out. So you have a big harbor, but it's not efficient. And investment in the harbor is something that is very feasible. So there are companies, Jamaican companies, of course, but also European companies working there. If you really want to upgrade the harbor, we need to make a case, and the government needs to make a case for making the harbor a medium to long-term plan. For example, one of the things, if you were talking about supply chains with Europe, in the next 15 years, just as Jamaica is going to go renewable energy, in the next 15 years, Europe is going to say everything that comes to Europe needs to be green. Therefore, the ships bringing stuff to Europe need to be green. They need to be green powered. So we are working on how to shift from diesel in the ships to green hydrogen, for instance, or other types of fuel. Now, if the Kingston Harbour has a green hydrogen capacity or a green fuel or a sustainable fuel capacity, or it doesn't, it will determine whether you can become a value chain stop for Brussels and for Europe. And if you have it and other islands in the Caribbean don't have it, well, you are ahead, and vice versa. Second thing probably is the whole energy issue. Making energy investments in renewable energy requires a lot of investment. And that either requires that the government is going to pay for the investment or the investment is going to pay for itself. So one of the things that everybody's looking for, but this is not only in Jamaica, this is the whole world is looking at how do we produce more renewable energy? How do we pay for the extra cost of producing renewable energy? And then how do we provide returns for the countries, for the companies that are going to invest in that renewable energy? So if, for example, you're allowed to produce, but you're not allowed to sell, or you're not allowed to self-consume what you're producing, nobody's going to produce it. At the same time, if you start producing renewable energy in a country like Jamaica, which does not seem to have a problem with wind or with sun, or for green hydrogen with water, one of the things you're going to start doing is saving currency on oil and gas. So it's an investment for the next 25 years. If you now invest on more oil and gas, you're locked in for the next 25 years. If you invest in renewable, you're going to be ahead of the curve when people around the world are going to ask for green products that are green transported. But if you don't have an electricity market that is organized to promote, it's not only about putting a plant and producing renewable energy, it's also about having the necessary market incentives so that the production of energy is accessible also to the people. Because if you have fantastic green energy and people can't pay it, it's not a great idea. But for example, Jamaica is one of those places where the price of the energy is higher in the Caribbean. So all these kinds of things you need to put in the mix. But it's clear that the energy mix and how renewable the energy mix is going to be, if you want to become a hub for any value chain, you need to start putting in the mix that the value chain is green, because that's where the world is going. It's not where Europe is saying, it's where Europe is going, but it's you listen to what Colombia is saying, what the president of Colombia is saying. We live off drilling and selling oil and gas. Reasonably, in 20 years' time, oil and gas will be out of business. So if Colombia exports oil and gas to live, we have a problem. The same goes for all the islands in the Caribbean who go on oil and gas for their economies, for everything. But you have a fantastic wind, solar, water capacity. Obviously, that's probably the thing you have most. So if we start thinking about it, how can we from Europe bring some of the lessons we've learned, some of the investments and technologies that we have? And that's where you can maybe jump ahead here in Jamaica, the third issue probably is going to be the technology and the digitalization. One of the main worries that we all have is many of the renewable energy, grid management, all these kinds of things require a lot of technology, and in particular a lot of digital technology. So if you don't have a good digital environment and framework which is secure in terms of secure connectivity and cybersecurity, you can be hacked. It's not about just putting a solar plant or a green hydrogen thing. You need to do a lot of IT stuff with it, but if your plant can be hacked, you're doomed. And that's the whole problem that we're having. That's one of the things we are looking into the Digital Alliance with the Caribbean and Latin America. In Europe, we are building a kind of a cyber wall. It's kind of a coalition of all the 27 member states to build a cyber security capacity. In the internet and digital, there's no walls anymore. It's just people behind a computer. But it's kind of a combined capacity to build a cybersecurity framework that can defend against intruders, can defend people, can defend data, can defend infrastructure. All this, if you want to build, if you want to have 50% of renewables in Jamaica, you need to start thinking about this. And I think the fourth element is the people, which is probably the first element, is you need to have people for this. So these are the jobs of the future, the green transition and the digital transition. If you don't have people here, investment won't come. You may have an excellent regulation, you may have an excellent harbor, but if you don't have the technicians, people will go where the technicians are, where the skilled workers, not top engineers, the middle-class workers. And that's what you need. And if you can get a number of those to be women, normally half of them, then, so that's what we're exchanging with the government on.